After we introduce the valuation for bonds, for different kind of bonds, including zero coupon bond and annual payment or semi-annual coupon bonds, now let's take a look at the following questions. First, can you calculate the price of a 30-year zero coupon bond when the discount rate is 6%? And for these calculations, let's use semi-annual compounding or say discounting. And once you get the price for this bond, then change the discount rate from 6% to 7%, other things equal. Then what will be the new price? And when you compare the old price when the interest rate was 6% and the new price when the interest rate was 7%, what do you see? Did the price rise or fall? Does it increase or decrease? So if it does increase or decrease, how much is the percentage change? So this is actually a question about how would a 30-year zero coupon bonds price change when you use different interest rates. And then you may want to repeat this question for a 30-year 5% coupon bond. You notice between question 1 and 2, both are 30-year bonds, so they have same maturity, but apparently one is zero coupon bond, the other one is a 5% fixed coupon bond. And once you work on this question, you find out the price for this 30-year 5% coupon bond when the interest rate is 6%, and then you change the interest rate from 6% to 7% and find the new price. And again, then you compare the two prices and you try to see would the price go up or down, and if it does go up or go down, how much is the percentage change. And then let's repeat this question, but now for a 2-year 5% coupon bond. If you compare question number 2 and number 3, you realize now both bonds are 5% coupon bonds, but one has a pretty long maturity of 30 years and one has a pretty short maturity of 2 years. So again, you are pretty much doing the same thing. You are trying to find the price of this bond when the interest rate, or say the discount rate, is 6%, and then you change the discount rate to 7%. You try to find out whether the new price is an increase or decrease from the old price. So I would say pause the video by now and try to find out the prices for all these different kind of bonds when the interest rate was 6% and then change it to 7%. So you're actually going to find 6 different prices, right? And now let's take a look. Actually, the answer, when you have a 30-year zero coupon bond, the price on this 6% discount rate, or say market interest rate, was this much, and when you change that to 7%, then the price changed to 126, which is lower than 169. So apparently you see a negative change, or say the price dropped. And percentage-wise, you have about 25% change, which is the difference between these two numbers. You find out the difference between these two numbers divided by, and then the difference divided by 169.73. You will get a percentage change, which is 25.2%. We use negative because it's a decrease. And you do the same for the 30-year 5% coupon bond, and you find two prices, and you notice the difference, or say the change, is about 12.9% decrease. Now for the 2-year 5% coupon bond, the price also changed, and the difference is about negative 1.8%. So what kind of conclusion can we draw from this kind of exercise? First of all, for all these bonds, when the interest rate goes up from 6% to 7%, you notice that for all of them, the prices drop. So that's why we say there is a negative relationship between bond price and interest rate, or say the market interest rate. Market interest rate goes up, bond price would drop, and market interest rate goes down, bond price actually will go up. We do see that different bonds display different patterns, or say different degrees of price change. When you look at a 30-year 5% coupon bond and a 2-year 5% coupon bond, so this is a 30-year 5% and this is a 2-year 5%. One has a change of almost 13% and one has a change of lower than 2% change. So when you have a longer maturity versus a shorter maturity bond, apparently the longer maturity bond has a higher percentage change. Here they both have the same coupon rate. And then when you look at a 30-year 0 coupon bond versus a 30-year 5% coupon bond, apparently they are both 30 years, so same maturity but different coupon rates. Now the 30-year 0 coupon bond display a very big change, percentage change in price, and 30-year 5% bond, the change relatively is actually smaller. So which one has a higher percentage change in price between these two? The one with 0 coupon bond, or say lower coupon bond, right? So again, the conclusions we can draw from here is, first of all, there is always a negative relationship between bond price and the market interest rate, or say the discount rate. Second of all, different bonds react differently, and when we look at bonds with different maturities, higher maturity, higher percentage change. When we look at bonds with different coupon rates, then lower coupon rates, then higher percentage change, right? So this is just what we just talked about. Couple of points here. The change in bond price as a result of changes in the interest rate is called interest rate risk. So the risk is the fact that bond price will go up when the interest rate goes down, but bond price will go down when the interest rate goes up. So for example, nowadays people are watching the Federal Reserve's decision about maybe they are gonna raise the interest rate. If that does happen later, or say in the near future, you may see the bond price, bond market. In the bond market, bond price will go down. Now, interest rate risk does not affect all bonds equally. So what kind of bonds have higher interest rate risk, or say will be more affected? Generally, bonds with longer maturity, or the bonds with lower coupon rate. So here we say bonds with higher coupon rate has lower interest rate risk, and also bond with lower or 0 coupon rate has higher interest rate risk. Now, if we have this kind of question, this kind of conceptual question, for example, which of the following 4 bonds would be more sensitive to 1% change of interest rates? I can also ask this question in different ways. I can say, which of these following bonds has the highest interest rate risk? Or I can say, which of these following bonds have the highest interest rate sensitivity? So apparently, if we are looking for bonds with the highest interest rate risk or highest interest rate sensitivity, we are looking for the bond that has the highest, or say longest maturity and lowest coupon rate. And among these 4, we see 30-year 0 coupon bond offers this combination. So this one has the highest interest rate risk, or say will be most sensitive to the 1% change of interest rates. Okay, which one among the 4 will be least sensitive? Well, that would be the one with shortest maturity and highest coupon rate. So that would be the 1-year 5% coupon bond. Okay, so the answer is provided here. And so you get the idea. Bonds with longer maturity react more dramatically when there is change in the market interest rates. When interest rate goes down, and bond price will go up, right? So maybe you are thinking, in that case, we will have nothing to be concerned about. We would like it when market interest rate goes down. But we also need to be aware of the fact that when interest rates are declining, bonds actually also face a so-called reinvestment risk. What does it mean? It means the risk that future coupons from a bond will not be reinvested at the prevailing interest rate when the bond was initially purchased. For example, if we are thinking about a bond with 10% coupon rate, so every year the bond pays $100, right? And that is the coupon payment from the bond. Now, if the interest rate, the market interest rate actually goes down, then this $100 you receive, you cannot reinvest it at a high interest rate or high rate of return anymore. And that is the so-called reinvestment risk. So what kind of bonds would be immune to this reinvestment risk? We say zero coupon bonds, right? Because there's no coupon payments, then no worry or no concern about reinvesting those coupons. That means they are actually immune to the so-called reinvestment risk. But also you know that they actually are subject to pretty high interest rate risk, right? So zero coupon bonds are the only fixed income instruments, or say bonds, to have no reinvestment risk, since they do not make coupon payments, but you are well off the high interest rate risk they are subject to. So apparently in the financial market, nothing is risk-free. You look at a zero coupon bond, no reinvestment risk but high interest rate risk. And you look at a high coupon bond, they may provide some cushion from interest rate risk, but they are subject to maybe high reinvestment risk. Now let's take a look at bond yields, or say what kind of return are we getting, what kind of yields are we getting from investing in bonds. The first measure we look at is called the current yield. Current yield is actually pretty simple. By definition, it is calculated as the bond's annual coupon rate divided by the bond's current market price. So for example, if you are paying $900 to buy a 10% coupon bond, you pay $900, that's the current market price. Once you pay $900 to get this bond, next year, or say within 1 year, it's going to pay you $100. So $100 coupon payment out of $900 you just paid, that is the so-called current yield. It measures the rate of return you, the bondholder, would earn from the coupon interest rate alone when you buy the bond at a stated market price. However, the coupon interest rate does not measure the total expected return because it does not account for any capital gain or losses. Why? Because you only look at the coupon payments. Next year, the bond price may go up or it may actually go down. When the bond price goes up or go down, you may realize a so-called capital gain or capital loss. But if you only look at the current yield, this does not measure your return, or say you are not including the capital gain or losses in the calculation, and you are not getting a full picture about your return from the bond investment. So that's why for a more comprehensive measure of the return of your bond investment, we use the so-called yield to maturity. So what is yield to maturity, YTM? The yield to maturity calculation tells bond investors the total, or say comprehensive rate of return that they may expect if the bonds were bought at a particular price and held to maturity. So if you know the price you pay for the bond, and so that's your amount you invest, and then you compare it to all the coupon payments you are going to receive. And also, in addition to the coupon payments, if you hold it till maturity, you're going to receive all the future coupon payments and a final lump sum par value payment, right? Remember, bond payment include all those coupon payments and a final par value payment, right? So you're comparing what you have to pay as the price of the bond and what you can receive, including the coupon payment and the future par value payment. So the problem is, if you try to solve for this equation manually, it can get pretty complicated. But with your financial calculator, it actually can be pretty easy. So let's see. If you are looking at a 3.5% treasury bond, 4 year left to maturity, and quoted price of this much, and it's asking you to calculate the current yield, which is again the coupon payment, annual coupon payment divided by the price, and the yield to maturity. So click here for this video that explains how to work on this question to get the result of the bond current yield and yield to maturity. Once you watch that video, you get some idea about how to do the calculation for the current yield and yield to maturity. Come back to this slide, or say this lecture, and let's try to practice questions. First of all, current yield calculation. If you are looking at a 4.5% coupon bond and the price is this much, remember this is not $102. This is 102.08% of the par, right? And then the next question is, you have another bond, 14 years left to maturity, and the price is this much, and it's asking you for the yield to maturity, assuming the interest payment are semi-annual, or say you are receiving every coupon payment every 6 months. So for the first question, pretty simple. 4.5% coupon payment divided by, this is the price. So you notice here we are using both percentage. So if we use both percentage, that's fine. Or if you say, hey, I want to use dollar values, so use 4.5% coupon interest rate multiplied by the $1,000 par value, you get the total coupon payments, right? And then you divide it by this percentage number multiplied by 1,000 par value to get the price of the bond, and you do the dividing and you will get the same result, which is about 4.41%. So that is the the current yield from the bond investment, your return from receiving the coupon payments. Now, if we want to calculate the yield to maturity, we try to use the financial calculator. These are the inputs you want to enter into your calculator. We have 28 payments because 14 years, 2 payments a year. And the price, you notice we are using a negative number for the price. Okay, this is how much you are going to pay. Now, how much are you going to receive? You're going to receive $21.5 every 6 months, and there will be 28 of them. So this is an annuity, 28 payments, each payment being 21.5. In case you are thinking, why 21.5? 21.5 is 1,000 par value multiplied by 4.3% annual coupon rate, and then divided by 2. Okay, and the future value is 1,000. So no matter whether you are having an annual payment bond or semi-annual payment bond, the future value is always 1,000 unchanged. And again, price negative, payment positive, and future value also positive. So think about the positive numbers as what you receive and the negative number as what you have to pay. So you pay the price now, you receive all these money in the future. And what is your implied return every time? You compute I, you get 2.432%. Actually, your calculator will tell you 2.432. And since this is the interest, the I, when the calculator gives you 2.432, you know it's 2.432%. And that is for every 6 months, right? So for the whole year, we want to multiply it by 2 to get 4.86%. Okay, so when we talk about yield to maturity, it's always an annual figure. So that's why whenever you get a result from your semi-annual coupon bond, your result is for 6 months, and you always want to convert it into a 12 months figure, or say annual figure, simply by multiplying this number by 2. Okay, and that 4.86% is your annual yield to maturity. Once you know how to calculate the yield to maturity, we say bond prices yields are inversely or say negatively related. This is pretty natural to understand. If you have to pay more, or say pay a higher price, then the return you get will be lower. If you want a higher return, then you will be willing to pay a lower price today. Otherwise, your return will not be that high, right? So bonds at a discount. Remember, when bonds are traded below the par, that's a discount, right? Bonds at discount will have a yield to maturity greater than the coupon rate, and bonds at premium have a yield to maturity that is lower than or say less than the coupon interest rate. Speaking of bond return or say bond yield, there is another concept that we have to understand, and this has something to do with the municipal bonds. Remember, at the beginning of this chapter we mentioned municipal bonds comparing to other corporate bonds and treasury securities. They have one so-called advantage. The interest from municipal bond is tax exempt. Also, you do not have to pay income tax for the interest you receive from your investment in the municipal bonds. And that actually allows municipal bonds to offer low return or say low yields to investors. Okay, so for example, if you look at a municipal bond that returns 5% per year, and a corporate bond with the same level of risk that would return 6%. You cannot simply say, hey, 6% is higher than 5%, then the corporate bond is better or say is more profitable. It actually depends on what kind of tax you are paying. So if you are subject to a 30% tax rate, after tax you get 4.2% return from the corporate bond, and 4.2 is the 6% before tax rate multiplied by 1 minus t. So from the 6% yield, you actually get 4.2% after tax. That's from the corporate bond. But when you look at the municipal bonds, this is before tax and this is also after tax, because you are not required to pay tax on these 5% return from the muni bond anyway. Okay, so that actually gives you the idea that if you are subject to a 30% tax rate, then for you the 5% return from the muni bond is actually better than the 6% return from the corporate bond if we are considering after-tax return. And for investors, after all, it is the after-tax return that matters. So whether the corporate bond is really a better investment or not, that depends on investors' tax rate. And that brings up the concept of the so-called equivalent taxable yield. The equivalent taxable yield simply is the muni yield divided by 1 minus t. And notice that tax rate t may be different for different investors. So if you are a regular investor, you may pay a 30% tax rate. But if you are, for example, university foundation, you are actually subject to 0 tax rate, or say your return is always tax-free, right? So tax rate could be different for different investors. And the point here is each investor needs to know what kind of tax rate he or she is subject to, or he or her fund is subject to. So let's take a look at this example. If we are looking at a municipal bond that has a pre-tax yield of 5%, and the investor's marginal tax rate is 35%. So we're looking at an investor that is subject to 35% tax rate. Then, according to the equivalent taxable yield formula, you have 5 divided by 1 minus t, and that gives you 7.69% return. Now, what does this number mean? That means a corporate bond has to offer at least 7.69% for this investor. Otherwise, after tax, the corporate bond will not offer, it will not be as attractive as a 5% return from the muni bond. So we say municipal bonds actually are very attractive to high-income investors. Why? Because these high-income investors are usually subject to very high marginal tax rates. So this tax-free feature makes the municipal bond very attractive to them, because otherwise they will have to pay pretty high tax. So this is municipal bonds and the so-called equivalent taxable yield that we need to understand as something relevant about the bond yield. There's another practice question for you to think about, and this is question number 31 from the end of chapter 7, and the answer is provided here. Equivalent taxable yield as calculated 6.72%. That means a corporate bond has to offer at least 6.72%. Now you do have a corporate bond that offers 6.45%, which is not enough. That means you should take the muni bonds instead of the corporate bonds. So we've actually finished all the calculations in chapter 7, and the last couple of slides are some discussion about the so-called credit risk of bonds and credit ratings. So credit risk refers to the risk that a bond issuer will default on the bond if they fail to make required coupon and principal payments. Remember, bonds are so-called debt obligations, or say debt securities. So when you issue a bond, you are making a promise to pay back money, and if you fail to make these payments, then you are having a so-called credit risk. Bond ratings can be used to measure issuer's credit risk and help investors to assess the likelihood of the bond that the bond will or will not be repaid. So if we want to understand the credit risk, or say how risky is a bond, we look at the so-called bond ratings. And the higher rating, usually we say the lower risk, the lower credit risk of a bond. And that means it's very unlikely that the bond will default. But if a bond has very low rating, then we say the risk is actually pretty high, then the likelihood of the bond that will default will be pretty high. So who would issue those ratings? We do have the so-called bond rating agencies such as Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch. That's why actually when you look at the slides about Southwest bonds at the beginning of this chapter, you see the so-called Fitch rating, right? So apparently Fitch rating is simply the rating, credit rating of a bond assigned by Fitch. So these kind of rating agencies monitor bond issues and report their findings as a grade or rating based on several factors such as the issuer's financial condition, the general economic condition, and the collaterals, stuff like that. So for example, if Standard & Poor's decides that a company's credit risk is pretty low, they may assign a AA or AAA rating. And again, the concern, or say that consideration, is based on many factors. If you are interested, you can click here to find an article from Standard & Poor's that explains how what those ratings are and how they can be useful to the financial market. Usually, if a bond has a rating above BBB or BBB minus, that's actually, well, I would say pretty decent. So you see that I put a line here. Okay, above this line, you have the so-called investment grade bonds. So those bonds are considered that fairly safe investments. And if a bond has a rating that's below this line, for example, a CCC, and those are so-called speculative grade. So that means when you buy those bonds, you're not really making reasonable investment, you are more like speculating. And of course, if you're lucky and the bonds do not default, then you may realize a pretty high return. But again, the risk of those bonds going default or say not making the payment actually is pretty high. So again, a trade-off between risk and return, that's the concern for all the investors in the financial market, including the bond market. Do you have to memorize that? I don't think so, but bottom line is you need to understand the concept of investment grade, which are safer investment, and speculative grade, which are really not that safe investment, right? So again, generally bonds with rating BBB or above are considered as investment grade, and bonds with ratings below BB are considered speculative, or sometimes we call them the junk bonds. So you see the word junk, you understand those are not really very safe or reasonable investments. So investors will only purchase these bonds if they offer much higher return, and certain types of institutional investors, for example pension funds, they are not allowed to buy and hold non-investment grade bonds, or say they are not allowed to invest in the junk bonds because of the high risks involved. Different bonds issued by the same company, same issuer, may still have different ratings if they have different characteristics. So that's why you need to understand several terms about different kind of bonds. So we have a debenture. So a debenture is actually the unsecured bonds, corporate bonds, backed only by the reputation and the ability for the corporation to pay, which means there is no collateral associated or say linked with those debentures. Now we do have mortgage bonds. Mortgage bonds or equipment trust certificates, those are bonds backed by collateral in the form of the real estate or equipment. So those bonds are considered safer and usually may have a different, or say higher ratings. So generally unsecured bonds are more risky, and bonds with collaterals are considered a little bit less risky. You also have the so-called senior bonds versus junior bonds. When you see the terms, you may think, maybe senior bonds are older while junior bonds are newer. That's not really the case. A senior bond has a superior claim on the assets and income of the issuer. That means in the event that the issuer encounters some type of financial problem, senior bond holders will be paid first. So senior or not, it's about the priority of getting the payment. It's not really about the age or when the bond was issued. So senior bonds carry less risk. And junior bonds, sometimes called subordinate bonds, they carry less priority, and they are typically not backed up by the collateral, so therefore they are unsecured, and so they are considered more risky than the senior bond. So again, senior versus junior is not about the age, it's about whether they have higher or lower risk, whether they have the priority in getting the payment, whether they are backed by collaterals, or whether they are secured. Let's take a look at the so-called relationship between the risk and yield. It's pretty natural to understand that bond yield is affected by the credit risk. So higher quality bonds, or say bonds with lower credit risk, they don't have to offer high returns to attract investors. So they actually offer lower yields. And the lower quality bonds, or say bonds with very high credit risks, they actually have to offer higher yields to attract investors. So that's why sometimes the junk bonds, remember junk bonds are the bonds with very high credit risk, right, very low ratings, and they are also called high yield bonds because they do have to offer pretty high yields, otherwise investors would not want to invest in those junk bonds. If you are interested, just take a look at this figure here, and as you see, these are yield to maturity on bonds with different credit risk. So you are looking at the yellow curve, which is for a AAA rating bond, and the green curve here, this is for a BAA rating bonds. So BAA, the rating is lower than the AAA rating, and therefore the yield actually has to be higher. Now remember, treasury bonds usually are considered risk-free, or very low risk. And so treasury bonds yield usually are very low, or say much lower than the corporate bonds. So that's about the relationship between credit risk and yield. So this is chapter 7, and in this chapter we try to look at several terms associated with bonds or bonds characteristics. We try to identify different kind of bond issuers, so who issue bonds and what kind of bonds do we usually look at. We explain how TIPS payment is adjusted by CPI to protect investors from inflation. So you are expected to know how to calculate the adjusted principal and coupon interest payment from TIPS once the CPI changes. We also talk about how to read bond quotes. So treasury bonds, corporate bonds, apparently they are quoted differently. So when we see a number about the quotes, we should be able to translate that into a dollar value for the bond price. Then we try to look at how to calculate bond price for different kinds of bonds. So we did zero coupon bonds, we did annual coupon bond, and also semi-annual coupon bond. So bond price is always determined by the coupon interest rate, the number of years till maturity, the market interest rate as a discount rate, and of course the future value, which is usually by default $1,000. You should be able to explain the concept of interest rate risk. So what is interest rate risk? And of course, what kind of bonds have higher interest rate risk, and what kind of bonds would have lower interest rate risk? And also, what is the so-called reinvestment risk? In terms of investing in the bond, we need to know how to measure our return, or say the yields. So we need to know how to calculate current yield and also yield to maturity. And for the when there is municipal bonds involved, how do we calculate the equivalent taxable yield, and how do we use that to help us make reasonable investment decisions? You also should be able to explain the concept of credit risk and credit rating. So what is credit rating, and what kind of bonds are subject to higher credit risk, and also what is the relationship between the credit risk and yields?